All right, everyone, thank you for your patience while we worked through that. We got our amazing panelists here, and we got a great agenda for the day. We're going to start with some introductions so you can meet everyone here. We'll go through the background of the report, and then we'll highlight some statistics around quota attainment and motivation, plan simplicity, alignment to metrics, and a Q&A. If you do have questions or comments, please feel free to add to the chat. Our lines are open, as is the Q&A. We'll also try to address these questions as they come up, and we'll also provide time at the end for any lingering questions. So we'll be watching that chat. I might not be able to see it, but hopefully someone here can see it. Any members from the QuotaPath team, feel free to Slack me. I am able to see that right now. So wonderful. For intros, hello, I'm your host, Kelly. I'm here out of lovely Austin, Texas. At QuotaPath, I oversee our content strategy and write all the time about all things sales compensation, including today's topic of discussion, our 2024 compensation report. If you are unfamiliar with QuotaPath, may I encourage you to please familiarize yourself. We're pretty awesome. We help make your sales compensation processes more efficient through expert guidance and user-friendly technology. You can check us out on QuotaPath.com or learn more or experience it firsthand by signing up for a free trial where you can actually sync that CRM of yours, invite your team, and set up commission tracking. That's enough about me. More importantly, I'm joined today by these incredible speakers. Would love for each of you to intro yourself, where you're located, your role and who you work for, and something about you that we can't learn from your LinkedIn page. Pablo, I'll kick it off to you first.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks for having us. Pablo Dominguez. I'm an operating partner with Insight Partners, a venture capital and private equity firm based in New York City. I focus on supporting our portfolio companies on sales and customer success, helping them scale as they, from inception to insight till exit, basically helping them scale. And fun fact about me, grew up in Texas. I went to school in Austin, so I'm not close to you right now, Kelly, but I love to smoke meat, barbecue. It's one of my hobbies. So we'll be doing that this weekend.
Awesome. And Celine, will you please go next?
Hi, I'm Celine Grey. I lead sales enablement effort at Normative, who is a Swedish company that enable companies to calculate the carbon footprint. So eventually helping them on their path to net zero. I'm based in London. A fun fact is that I moved house 27 times, lived in 4 countries and worked in over 22. So I have a lot of cultural awareness. And I'm not quite sure whether this house is the final house or whether there's going to be a house 28. We'll see. But if you need any tip on packing, then I'm your woman.
Oh my gosh, Celine, that's amazing. What are some of the other countries you've lived in?
I lived in the UAE, I lived in Ireland, in the UK, in France, and I worked all across North America, EMEA, and Asia. So the only 2 continents I've not done is West Africa and Latin America. So, I've got another 20 years to go in order to explore those. So,
yeah, awesome. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And last but not least, Sergey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sergey Golosinskiy. I'm VP of Finance at Applecart. We're a marketing technology firm that empowers executives to reach their most important and hard-to-reach decision makers at scale. I previously have a few different finance roles at other startups. Started my career in investment banking at Societe Generale and financial advisor at PwC. Based here in New York. And a fun fact, I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 15 years. So when I'm not spending time in front of spreadsheets or with my wife and kids, I'm usually training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Awesome. Sergey, how many kids do you have?
I have 2 kids.
How old are they?
2 little girls, 3 and 6.
I have 2 little girls, 3 and 5. Such a handful. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's why today after dropping them off, I feel like I already had an 8-hour workday, even though it's only 11 a.m. here.
That is absolutely relatable. I feel for you. We'll have to talk more about that offline. But that's not why we're here today to talk about our kids. We are here today to discuss the results of this report. Before we get into those, I want to share some background about this year's. For the past 3 years, QuotaPath has published an annual report covering sales compensation trends, patterns, and challenges Things like how often teams use accelerators, what the standard commission rate is, and who's responsible for running commissions. Well, those are all really valuable. We've covered it at length, and we do cover those throughout the year in content and other webinars, workshops, things like that. So this year's report, we wanted to focus exclusively on the challenges amongst leadership to draw attention to the friction between revenue, finance, and sales leaders when it comes to sales compensation. And more importantly, how those challenges actually impact performance and retention. So in partnership with the company Global Surveys, we surveyed leaders toward the end of the first half of 2023, which, as some of you may recall, was pretty tough for many of us in tech. And as it turns out, for the hundreds of revenue leaders we surveyed, they shared some similar experiences. Here's a bit more about who we surveyed. We collected data from over 450 finance, RevOps, and sales leaders, primarily from those in the VP level roles and above, and at companies with 100+ employees. These are leaders from SaaS and tech-related fields, including insurance and manufacturing, and from organizations within the US and the United Kingdom. Our objectives for the report were to identify where this disconnect exists between finance, RevOps, and sales leadership during the design and execution process, explore the challenges faced during the compensation plan design process, uncover the biggest holes when managing commissions, and of course, offer guidance to set up success in 2024. So if you go ahead and read that report, you'll notice after every report section, we do offer best practices and tips on how to overcome those. All right, for the good stuff, on to the results. Our first stat today, we will talk about quota. 91% of teams are missing quota attainment rates right now of 80% and above, meaning their collective team attainment is less than 80%. Whew, that's a lot. Here's why they're missing. Market, obviously a reason here, that came in tied at first at 36%, with sales historically having a high turnover rate, especially on the heels of the mass exits of 2022. The lack of experience or skill from reps coming in at 36% didn't surprise me. But what did grab my attention is 35% citing missed quota due to misaligned sales activities. In fact, 4 of the reasons here relate to compensation plans: misaligned sales activities, lack of motivation, new hire ramp-up periods, and unrealistic quota and sales goals, which goes back to those market conditions. Pablo, I want to start with you. What other challenges are you seeing outside of these listed?
Yeah, one of the things we see, and it's predominantly in the tech sector, is companies have overhired reps, right? So if you have too many reps, you don't have enough opportunities, enough leads coming in. Therefore, if you have 10 reps and maybe you should only have 6, quota attainment is down. So a lot of companies are right sizing to make sure they have the right number of people. But also on misaligned sales activities, in talking to a lot of our portfolio companies, sometimes they're wondering why they're missing expansion goals and or new goals. And so depending on how you design your compensation plan, so I'm glad you guys have this. If you're not incenting for the behaviors you want, reps will do what's easiest for them and focus on that. So it's good to see that as one of the top 3 things, because that's something also we're seeing.
Yeah, it's something that can be fixed. Celine, what are some of the things you're seeing or would like to comment on some of these trends that are happening right now?
Yeah, to echo Pablo, there's been a lot of growth at all costs, which has led to people overhiring and taking a quota and just multiplying the quota without truly looking at the market. On top of that, I think as well, when you create that scarcity in terms of company, reps are going to panic and they're going to try to focus their effort absolutely everywhere rather than focus on the ICP, ideal customer profile, and the ideal business persona, where they can truly make the money. And what I do find from an enablement perspective, when I'm coming into those companies, they don't tend to really have a plan to market that enables every single person in that company to over 80%. So it leads to that erratic, and then after they just do a restructure.
Yeah, Celine, you mentioned a really good point about ICP that I know I've written at length about the importance of it this year. What advice do you have for teams who maybe haven't fully developed that yet on how to go about unpacking and discovering what their ICP is and why that's so important?
run an analysis in terms of business. It depends on the maturity of the company, obviously, right? And the product roadmap and where you are. But developing an analysis of your wins and your lose is going to really help understand where's your sweet spot. Really think not in terms of feature. I'm working with a company right now in parallel who's really focusing on transforming themselves because the service is becoming redundant, and then purely focusing on what they can do rather than the customer challenges. And so what is it that you solve, and who do you solve it for, and who do you solve it for best, and how is it a must-have for these people? So there need to be a complete 360 and alignment with marketing, sales, product, finance, and really channel, if you have a channel, and really gather everybody around that focus area. And that comes then in terms of sales leaders to go into territory planning and account planning and tiering between your SDR, your AE, your enterprise AE. All of this needs to be permeated everywhere and have the marketing language, the customer stories, and everything else to back it up. And you can get consultancies to help you if you do not have the knowledge internally to do it. It's really definitely a good investment.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry, I just got totally distracted. Pablo, when did you change your name to Johnny Cash? Has that been like this whole time?
Well, when I dialed in late and you're like, you're Celine, I was like, well, let me change it to something different.
Perfect. Nailed it. All right, back to the topic at hand. Sergey, what would you like to add on this? Have you noticed anything maybe that your team or other teams you work with are experiencing around quota?
Yeah, I would say that one thing that really jumps out is, especially in rapidly growing firms, there can be many changes to the product, the features, the pricing model, and those changes can happen, several times throughout the year, and it takes some time for all stakeholders internally to get up to speed and understand how the new features actually work, how they benefit the clients, how the new pricing model works, how does that benefit the clients, and actually be able to externalize that and effectively sell it. But then on the back end, the comp plan also needs to reflect those changes. And usually we try to avoid changing comp plans midway through the year, so you can have misalignment of the comp plan versus what you're actually selling. And the challenge with that approach is that you need to take into account, well, does it make sense for us to take a pause and revamp the sales plan and the commission plan halfway through the year, just due to the drastic changes to the product, or do we wait until the next annual planning cycle and make those changes there? So I think that's I've definitely seen that, especially as I mentioned, in very rapidly growing businesses.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk about alignment specifically in our third point later on. So I do have some questions around that. But you made such an excellent point about companies not wanting to change their comp plans. And in our 2022 study, we did find that the more times you change a comp plan, the less trust your sales reps will have in it, which of course you want to have your sales reps trust, but these are unprecedented times. We got to change these comp plans, y'all. If they are the same ones at the beginning and the market has changed so much, my point of view, absolutely change it. I do want to speak to some other quota issues here. The new hire ramp-up periods. What are some of your recommendations around compensation strategies that you can use to support new hire ramp-up periods? Open to, I don't know, Johnny Cash, why don't we start with you?
So two things. I see a lot of people make the mistake that they're going to be the first ever to change ramp times. And I'll admit I'm the first person who loves to challenge the status quo. It is very hard to ramp a person that normally takes 9 months or 3 months and reduce that by 50%, right? So I think setting unrealistic goals is it takes reps time to get acclimated with the company, right? Understand the product, understand the value prop, get trained, their territory, build relationships, depending on whether you're SMB, mid-market, or enterprise. So be realistic in terms of your ramping, but when you're ramping, rather than just giving a non-recoverable draw that's guaranteed for nothing, right? Typically those are 3 to 6 months, depending on the business you're in. We're seeing more companies set MBOs, right? Management by objectives that say, okay, here's your non-recoverable draw, but I expect you to start building X amount of pipeline, right? Or complete your training by X date, or have at least 8 discussions with C-level executives, et cetera. So being more targeted on what's expected of them as they ramp, I think gets people a little bit more closer to being productive.
I absolutely love that. Celine, in your role with sales enablement, do you have any suggestions around that as well?
Yeah, I think it starts with the hiring process and that understanding of the compensation. I'm part of a number of forums, both for sales enablement and sales. And we get a lot of questions from reps to go, this is my comp plan, this is what it says, I don't understand it. And very often they have taken those questions to the recruiter, or they have taken the questions to their sales manager. They got an answer and they still don't understand it. So I find it slightly alarming that they actually go to external channel, and even before they start, or at the very, the onboarding is like the honeymoon phase. You've changed job, you're excited about the new company, about the new role. If already you don't have clarity and transparency, this is only going to get worse. So the first thing is, during the hiring process, if you're hiring for quota carrying people, explain the compensation, get them to have a conversation with sales leadership so that it is clear for them. They understand at minimum how they're going to make money. During the onboarding process, compensation should be one of the first things. If you think about what people need to be successful, they need to know what to do, which is your skills and competency. They need to do it, which is your activity and your mindset. And then you need to give them the tools and processes in order to be effective and efficient. And so something like QuotaPath's fits into all of this, right? So at the very beginning of the onboarding, understanding how they're going to get paid and the path. And I think Pablo explained that very, very well. What is it that they need to do? You can't force a client to sign. The signature of a contract is a series of events. So break it down for them so they understand where they are on their journey, they're comfortable with it. And then they know that when they build the activity, eventually there's going to have a finality in terms of quota and what it requires. Pair them with A players, people that understand compensation, but people who understand the activity and what is required in order to be successful. And also link that compensation to the mission and the vision of the company. What is the North Star? So you may have a vision at 5 years, but what is the vision at 12 months is going to enable the company to go at 5 years? And how is the salesperson or the quota carrying person going to enable that through their activities? So it gives purpose to what they do, because at the end of the day, it is a repetition and very repetitive. And every month you go back at zero, or every quarter you go at zero. So you need to be able to focus people on the right thing, but also show them incremental progress. And that goes through data, visibility on the compensation, trust within the team, and all these elements.
Celine, thank you so much for the QuotaPath plug. If you were not going to do it, I certainly was. So I really appreciate that. I also want to add the importance of showing the math behind the comp plan so that new hires and your existing team really understand why the plan is built the way it is. And so they can see, okay, if I hit this, this impacts this. And as we're talking about tying these to North Star metrics, they can actually see the longer impact across the business, not just on their commission check for that. So just want to add that. Sergey, anything you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, I would say that the point around North Star metrics is very critical, because those can change for a company year over year. 1 year you might be more focused on GRR and NRR. Another year you might be more focused on growing your ARR or your bookings or your logos. So the sales reps need to really understand what are we trying to achieve in the upcoming cycle. And then, as Celine mentioned, like tying that to their comp, how are they getting compensated and bringing on those additional logos or driving that ARR? And then even taking a step back, why are those the key metrics for next year? Like there's a reason why the senior leadership and the board decided why, maybe next year we'll focus more on NRR versus ARR, for example. And having that more in-depth understanding, I think, is also just helpful from a personal perspective to understand why are we all rowing in this direction as opposed to different direction for the following 12 months.
For sure. Thank you. I want to add also, our chat is now enabled because, of course, this webinar is filled with some technical difficulties. That is now live. Add your Q&As there or in our Q&A field there. We've got them up. We are ready to take questions. I do have a question around motivating reps, as that was the 32% said lack of motivation was one of the reasons that their teams didn't hit quota. Another stat from the report showed that 30% point blank said that their plans do not motivate reps, which, if you ask me, that is a core function of a comp plan. So Johnny Cash / Pablo, I'll start with you. What plan components have you put into place, or have you seen put in place that motivate reps? What's worked and what hasn't worked?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because as a sales rep, right, you want to wake up hungry, excited to hit your number because you're going to make money, right? Because you went into sales, you like talking to people, you like selling a product, but ultimately salespeople want to make a lot of money, right? And so what I've seen work the best is, one is the compensation plan simple. To Celine's earlier point, right? I don't want to be taking out my calculus book from high school to figure out, did I make money today? Right? Am I going to achieve my quota? I want to understand, if I sell X, I get paid Y. And ultimately, as a business, I think it's important to reward for overachievement, right? And significantly reward for overachievement. So I think having very lucrative accelerators for overachieving the target that finance, the board, your sales leader has set is probably the most motivating thing. But there's also going to be some downside, right? If you don't achieve, you should be paid less. But my solution has always been to overpay for overachievement, because that's what the primary role of the sales rep is, to hit the target and overachieve.
Agreed, 100%. We just received a question. Thank you, Alyssa. She would like to know recommendations for comp plan components that will keep reps for the long term. They have a long sales cycle, about 6+ months. So they need to put in place intermediate rewards to keep them working till they sell a big deal. Any recommendations there, team?
Maybe I can take this one. Again, it starts at the hiring phase. So you need to make sure that you hire sales people that are cut for that length of sales cycle. Because some people prefer transactional volume and some people not. So that's super, super important. Clarity as well, as Johnny mentioned, what can happen is when you have a 6 months or 9 months, or sometimes even longer sales cycle, managing your forecast and your pipeline as a sales leader is also very, very important. So what are some of the behavior that you need to see intermediately so that you don't end up in 6 months, 9 months, 18 months down the line having missed target just because things were not done 9 months ago? So those intermediary incentives should be really based on the behavior that need to happen in order for those deals to close at that time. The other thing I'm going to mention is employee engagement of that team is very, very important in terms of team culture and how people feel recognized, and everybody's motivation is going to be different. So do they want the recognition? Do they want professional development? Do they want learning? So really for the leadership to understand that team and what drives that team on the long term is also going to be important. So it is touching compensation, and it is touching as well additional aspect of it. I'm sure Pablo or Sergey will have also opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, one thought that comes to mind is for such long sales cycles, it might be interesting to evaluate using a longer term quota, like an annual quota, as opposed to quarterly or monthly, because then reps are incentivized. Like if you have a kind of payout curve with accelerators, then effectively you need to stay for at least the full year to maximize your payout as you're getting closer to your full quota, most likely towards the end of the year. And from my experience, that usually tends to work better for those larger enterprise types of sales that last 6 months or longer.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a few more questions rolling in. Keep them coming, guys. I'm going to start with this next one. Recommendations on what to do if a leadership team is not explaining comp plans thoroughly. Onboarding ramping was not clear and transparent. Quotas are all over the place and unrealistic without a lot of explanation. That's a loaded one. Who wants to take that one? Question is, recommendations on what to do if leadership team is not explaining comp plans thoroughly.
I'll take that one. As someone who's rolled out comp plans at 2 public companies, if your leaders are not rolling out the comp plans, then you have bigger issues, right? Because your role, I'm assuming those of you that are on the call, could be sales leaders, could be heads of ops, could be running sales compensation within ops. Your role is to help enable the sales leader to communicate the plan, why there's changes, why we're motivating X or Y or not something else, right? And if you have that gap, your role is to get them to make sure they do communicate that, because that's not technically, the burden should not fall on you, right? Because then the leaders are not taking accountability for the job they have in managing their teams. If your leader's not doing that and you can't get them to, then I'd say you're in a difficult situation, but that should be rolled out by leadership.
Yep. And I will also add on that point the importance of getting your reps feedback on their comp plans regularly throughout the year, and especially as you're about to go beginning to design next year's. Poll them. What motivates them? What do they like about their comp plans currently? What would they like to see different? What didn't they like from last year's? That way you build a plan that hopefully motivates them and they understand it better. Another question, and then we'll move on to our next stat. And I do see these popping up. I will make sure we get to all of these. The next one, though, is should OTE be directly correlated to quota? For example, OTE should be 30% of quota. If so, how is base as a percentage of OTE impacted as quota scales from SMB to mid-market to enterprise?
We'll start with this also. I think we're conflating two things here. On your second point around base as a percent of OTE, maybe you meant OTE. So the mix of base and variable is a percentage of OTE, right? So whether it's 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, really is only predicated by how much risk do you want in the plan and how much upside do you want to reward someone, which is why when you see people on 50% base, 50% variable, you're basically saying this is a high risk, high reward plan, right? Versus sales engineers, specialists, people that are a little bit further away from the role will be on 70-30 pay mixes. So that's sort of the latter part of that question. The beginning part is, it's really more of a function of what can the business pay to remain profitable, right? A rule of thumb that we all see in the market is the ratio between quota and OTE should be 20%, right? So if you divide your OTE by the quota, you should get to, it should be 1/5 as a rule of thumb. As you're starting out as an early stage company, though, that number may be 30%, 40%, 50%. However, we do see that number increase significantly once you start getting into enterprise sales, multi-million-dollar deals. You may be paying reps $300K, $400K at target for bringing in $10 million, right? Because they're selling a $5 million deal, $5 million deal. So it's really more about profitability. That number can't be too low, otherwise the business cannot make money and pay you, right? But there is no, it has to be X, but you should be shooting for 20%.
Agreed. Thank you. Some of the questions we are getting in are very, very specific. So we're keeping track of these on the QuotaPath's side. We will reach out to you directly as they are getting very specific, which we love. But let's move on to our next stat, which is around maintaining plan simplicity. We asked, what is your biggest obstacle when it comes to designing sales compensation plans? And I do want to add some context around this. We gave leaders the chance to mark no challenges. And out of 500 leaders, not one person selected that. So unanimously, people are struggling with this. Here's the breakdown. 30% reported maintaining simplicity as their biggest hurdle. Getting that team alignment was second at 26%. 24% reported lack of experience designing plans as an issue, and getting rep buy-in came in at 20%. So we'll start with that simplicity. That's came up a few times already. Everyone knows the importance of it, yet it continues to be a huge problem. Why is it so hard to build a simple yet effective comp plan? Who would like to take that one? Sergey, can we start with you maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about the importance of the North Star metrics, and these are the key KPI, the most important KPIs the company is looking to achieve in the following year. And frequently, what I've seen happen is we started with one KPI that we're solving for, let's say bookings, and then we start layering on. Well, we also need to make sure that we retain NRR and GRR, and on top of that, we bring on additional logos, and then you start adding more metrics. and sometimes they can be in conflict with each other, and that starts adding more and more complexity to the plan. And what I've seen work fairly well is just focusing on one or two key metrics and letting go of the rest, and really making sure that the plan helps us achieve those one or two metrics. And the rest, if needed to adjust, you can add a spiff throughout the year. Maybe if you were missing on logos, we can add a spiff that incentivizes more logos. But at the end of the day, if we want to achieve bookings, everything should be driving all of the reps to achieve that bookings goal. And I think that allows you to remove some of the additional components that could change the comp plan from a 1-pager to like a 5-pager, and then that requires, as Pablo pointed out, a calculus book to actually figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah, Pablo, Celine, anything you'd like to add here?
I'll add one point. I think there was a question in here also. Someone asked, should you get rep input or feedback on the plan, which ties to that rep buy-in? Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you need to go out and get everybody's feedback, but it's important to always have the close, your ear to the ground with your key reps to test, hey, here's some changes we're making. What do you think? How is this going to impact you? Is it going to motivate other reps? And it might seem counterintuitive that reps will be not inclined to help, but I found, at least when I've done that, the best reps have the best interest for the company, right? Because they're also carrying equity and they want to win as a team. And yes, they want to make the most money, but they want to make sure the rest of the organization also does well. So definitely always get rep buy-in before and after, because if the reps believe in the good plan, when people push back, they will be advocates for the plan also, right? You cannot force everybody to be happy about the changes you roll out, whether you're the manager or not, but having reps that support you is very critical.
I'm going to add one thing from an enablement perspective in terms of what we do in terms of best practice. We loop in finance. There's a number of companies where finance would be the one presenting the compensation and not the sales leader, because that required alignment prior. And so basically it weaved a lot of barrier by the time the compensation plan got to salespeople. The other thing is using a lot of visuals. So calculators, examples, and really making sure that whatever your learning style is, you understand the compensation plan in the way that is suited to you, and also linking it to the territory plan and the account plan. So we work backwards, if you want, with a sales rep in order to do that.
Great, thank you. Simon, I see your question in the chat regarding when to comp commissions. Is it on payment, cash collection versus the booking of the deal? 2 years ago, the more widely practiced was to pay on the booking. That has since shifted, where now we are seeing early stage companies paying more frequently on the actual cash collection. I mean, my perspective is whatever makes most sense for your business, but the trend is starting to shift. If you're an earlier stage company, we are starting to see commissions paid on that booking versus, or I'm sorry, the payment versus the booking. Anything to add there, guys?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I've seen both. I would say the advantage of paying on cash collection is, of course, that it incentivizes the rep to work with the client to pay us as quickly as possible. The other benefit is that it avoids reps offering very flexible payment terms. Right? They would, if they need to collect cash as soon as possible, they are more likely to push for an upfront payment rather than quarterly or monthly invoicing.
That's a loaded question for Sergey, since he's in finance. Not fair.
Becomes a little bit tricky is when you do multi-year agreement and you have a yearly invoicing system. So you need to make sure that your compensation, I mean, encouraging multi-year agreement is a good thing in most company, but then you need to incentivize the salesperson to be able to do them. So there's different mechanisms as well to do that.
Yeah, actually, Celine, there's a question in the Q&A specifically around paying out multi-year deals. So let's address that for Doug. What is the best way to pay out a rep for multi-year deals that are annual payments, for example, a 3-year deal with annual payments. Sergey, wanna take that one?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I've seen different types of structures. In some cases, you know, if you're doing it on cash collection, you would pay some type of an accelerator when that cash comes in. So let's say you pay an additional 3% if it's a multi-year deal, and then that extra 3% will be paid out once the cash hits in year 2 and once the cash hits in year 3. I mean, if the business can afford it, you can also, you know, pay that upfront at the time of the booking. Of course, from a rep's perspective, that's the more lucrative. So I think it's important for the business to evaluate the potential cash impact and what are they trying to achieve. If, you know, as was mentioned in the QuotaPath report, if you're trying to drive retention and multi-year deals are a key to solve that, then maybe at least for the near term, you pay out the reps up front to really incentivize those types of deals.
Wonderful, thanks. All right. Other carrots that can motivate your team that are not comp related. Celine, on our prep call, you had some wild ones. What have you all seen work that are not specifically commission related to help motivate your teams?
So various ideas, right? I've seen sales leaders doing crazy things like washing the cars of the people who overachieve in the month. So they take an afternoon to wash the car. Or another one is the team can choose a fancy dress for the leader to wear at work for one day. It usually it's effort that gets the whole team very often to fix one standalone issue, right? Whether it's top of the funnel issue or win rate, things like that. What I've seen working well as well is stand-up comedy night, and depending of the level of overachievement, one or more leaders just joining in and having to do an improv. So it really getting people out of their comfort zone, but it's also a win-win for the team. There's things like, you know, lottery tickets that you can actually give for specific activity days. The C-level club breakfast that work really well. So that means that if you overachieve, you're part of an exclusive group, and then you're going to have breakfast with one of the C-level. It's also sometimes involving the partner, the family, the friends. So having restaurant vouchers or for 2, or a masterclass subscription for 2, or experience pack for 2. Leaderboards and gamification work quite well as well. And recently what we've seen is technology as well that comes in and ask each individual person to put in an individual goal. And when they hit certain milestone with their quota, the company participates. It's a bit like a crowdfunding for your dream, if you want, which then keeps people motivated on personal motivation. This is some of the incentives that we've seen.
Sergey, does Applecart offer anything to motivate the teams outside of the commission plans?
Well, we actually do not, but in my prior firm, we had a few different structures. We did a raffle one quarter where for each logo that you bring on, you get a raffle ticket, and then at the end of the quarter, you won a prize. Another quarter we had for the top achieving sales rep, they received an Airbnb voucher and a flight to a location of their choice in the US for them and their significant other. So I think that one was pretty exciting for the team. And usually anytime we rolled out a spiff, there would be some type of a more interesting prize, like along the lines of some of the things that Celine mentioned as well.
Great, thank you. You just mentioned spiff, which is a question in the Q&A. Should spiffs be used to incentivize or push test reps to overachieve beyond standard packages? Are spiffs meant to be realistic and achievable? Pablo, it looks like you might have some thoughts there.
Yeah. Be careful with spiffs, right? If you have too many spiffs, then you've designed the wrong comp plan. Because the comp plan is the reason I wake up. It's clear, or supposed to be clear, on what my job is. The purpose of a spiff is, hey, in Q4, we're launching a new product, so we want to make sure there's visibility into it. We don't want to change the comp plan, so pay whatever, I'm just making it up, right? $1,000 for every unit sold with a new product. The difficult part with spiffs is that if you don't clearly communicate to reps that the spiff is designed for the product introduction or orders lights, we want to push extra deals, etc., then people get addicted to spiffs and then they're expecting like, well, what's the next spiff? Now I'm not going to sell until I hear what comes out, right? So just be cautious that you don't over-engineer it to replace what the comp plan's intended to do.
Addicted to spiffs is going to be my next band name, I think. So thank you for the idea. There's another question too that kind of correlates to this that I've seen. Evan asked, on the topic of paying commissions, do you have best practices to share on how how discounts should be incorporated into commissions? I know I've seen spiffs used for if you sell a full price deal, no discounts, there's a spiff, and see if that did impact selling behaviors that potentially that's built into the comp plan the next time as a permanent fixture. What are your thoughts on discounting? Sergey, I'll start with you.
Specifically at Applecart, we normally don't offer discounts. So if there's a request by a sales rep to offer some type of discount, it gets escalated to our deal review panel. And then depending on the client relationship and what's being asked, then we'll evaluate it. And historically, I've seen also some structures where by default, a rep can offer maybe up to 5% discount. Anything greater than that needs to be escalated to VP of sales, for example. And usually, any type of a discount that gets effectively deducted from your commission. So you let's say you have a 5% discount, you would get paid on 95% of the deal as opposed to 100% value of the deal.
Who is on that deal review panel? Is that several leaders from across different departments?
Yeah, it's it's myself, our CEO, our VP of sales, our head of BizOps, and then our head of client services as well.
Nice. Another question, is there higher risk of rewarding via non-cash spiff payments from a financial risk perspective and incentivization perspective? For instance, this person's company has always discouraged anything like cash, gift card, trip, etc. type prizes with spiffs and always pushed toward cash prizes. Any type of higher risk of rewarding non-cash spiff payments that you've noticed? I haven't really thought about that.
I don't think there's risk. I think there's a compliance issue where any gift is technically taxable income. So if you're giving out a watch, a TV, iPad versus cash, there's that issue. But I don't know. It's a human element, right? Sometimes reps are just like, just give me the cash so I can do whatever I want with it, right? However, there's something to be said about a physical gift that people remember, right? People won't remember the cash next year. So part of your job in designing the right comp plan to drive behavior is you want people to have FOMO next quarter, next year when they see somebody with that thing you gave them, whether it's a dinner or something physical, a watch or something, that they go, oh, I want that, right? To Celine's point before, I want to have dinner with the CEO, right? And if you just gave cash, you lose that element of FOMO potentially. So it just depends what you're trying to drive.
FOMO is a very real thing, that's for sure. Thank you. Let's move on to our last point here. We've got about 13 minutes left. I do want to make sure we get through everything. And this was, I think, really alarming from all of the stats pulled in this 34-page whopper report. We asked our revenue leaders, to what extent do your plans align to your key business metrics? 1%, just 1% of RevOps said their plans align. Meanwhile, finance was much more confident at 12%, but that's still only 12%. I'll start with Sergey. Why, as a finance leader, why do you think finance leaders had more confidence in this alignment to key business metrics?
Yeah, well, finance is frequently responsible for calculating and tracking the key business metrics. And I think as part of the process for creating any commission plan, I think finance is usually closely involved, and we always keep those KPIs in the back of our head. So I think generally when we come out of any planning process, I feel that, we identified our North Star metrics for next year, and I think the plan pretty closely aligns with what we need to achieve, especially since usually finance has kind of the final sign off on the plan as well. And I think that was also the feedback that we that I've read in the QuotaPath report. So I would definitely tend to agree with all the sentiment that's outlined there.
Yeah, and Celine, we haven't heard from you in a while. What can businesses do throughout the year to make sure their comp plans stay aligned as the market changes?
There need to be a leadership alignment. So I think Pablo mentioned that before. I find that messy comp plan are very often also messy vision, messy mission, messy everything, right? So there need to be some accountability from leadership to simplify and focus the effort of everybody that work in that organization. In terms of alignment, it's about that cross collaboration and those working groups, and making sure that when you work on a comp plan, everybody that needs to be involved is involved. And it could be that you have a couple of senior sales people that can be involved in the conversation. It's a matter because they can test versus the past year and what they've done, how that comp plan would do, for example, or they can test versus their pipeline, how that comp plan would do. And they're very often, because they're on the field, a very good echo. Sales leadership absolutely should be part of this. Finance should be part of this. RevOps should be part of this. Enablement should be part of it and part of the compensation plan, because we're going to need to explain it. We also onboard people and make sure that this happens. The other thing is involving, sometimes when we have incentives, we involve those finance team and those RevOps teams into some of the nitty gritty, even for a day of sales, so that there is a feeling of connection and alignment. And sometimes we align them as well on, so if we do an incentive for the sales team, we're going to do kind of a fantasy league for some of the support team, and some of the support teams are going to be able to participate to the spiff by just creating their dream team. So the effort that you need is suddenly supported by a vaster amount of people, and you build that trust, that understanding, and this connection that is leading to that alignment, because there's alignment on paper of numbers, but that never translates to behavior. And if you want that alignment in terms of behavior, you need to build that trust and those critical conversation and those human connection.
Thanks, Celine. Pablo, Sergey, anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree on that. And I mean, on my end, I always try to have kind of ongoing conversations with sales leadership, with a handful of sales reps on the topic of compensation, just to we're not blindsided by anything that they're not satisfied with when it comes to the planning process. So that way, by towards the end of the year, as we're in Q4 now we have some very clear insights into what was working, what was not working. And tools like QuotaPath are also great for tracking sales team engagement. We can actually see how actively reps are logging in there and how many questions are they asking about what they're seeing in QuotaPath, and that also helps make sure that any feedback that comes from those conversations is incorporated into the next planning cycle.
Yeah, Sergey, what do you look at to evaluate if something is working or not?
Well, one is direct feedback from the sales reps. I think, especially once you, in a small org, it's much easier to develop very personal relationships with other individuals, where you can just casually grab a coffee with them and chat and say, well, how's it generally going? Or what do you think about the comp plan? What are your thoughts of what we can do better? And usually they tend to be very transparent about it. And, of course, sometimes they'll flag things that, are structurally in the plan that we can't change, but other times you'll realize that maybe we incorporated a component that's not incentivizing the behavior that we actually want to incentivize. So that's something that we'll take into consideration for the next planning cycle. And, the finance vertical has conversations with the sales team, the BizOps and the RevOps vertical has ongoing conversations with the sales team. And then we come together and we kind of reevaluate all the feedback that we've heard. And then that's how we go about starting the planning process for the following year.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Sergey. I pulled this from Mark Robert's LinkedIn post last week. I love what he says here on the importance of alignment. Aligning the sales compensation plan with the company's high-level strategy is one of the most powerful and scalable tools in the CEO's tools chest to drive alignment. It's very true, and it's so often overlooked. So let's get into this. Are y'all defining next year's targets right now? And if so, what are some compensation levers you're mulling over to incentivize or de-incentivize behaviors around those targets? Celine, maybe?
I have a little mantra that I use on everything when I go to work, which is understand data, focus on people. Because your data is not going to change itself unless the behavior of the people is there to actually execute on this. So there's an element for us, we kind of receive the target and what we need to do. So the way I'm looking at it is really working backwards in terms of what are the behavior that are going to help us get there, and looking at all the incremental skills, competency, content, effort, tools, technology, whatever it is, mindset, activity that are going to get us there. And then when we look at this and we look at the North Star, we extract the main elements. What is going to be the main behavior? What is going to be the main activity that is going to get us there? That is basically going to trigger all of the rest, and that's what we're going to build the compensation plan on. We're also looking at, obviously, product roadmap, and any change in market. So I've done shift from SMB to enterprise in a number of companies, and it's never as immediate as what people think. So it's also looking at that compensation and how, if we're doing a massive shift in the market, how we need to compensate people to be able to ramp in that shift. Do we need to put intermediary ramp target, for example? What is it tactically that we need to do in order to enable that? And the compensation is an element of that in order to be able to complete your transformation shift or whatever it is in the time that you want.
Sergey, how about you? Are you guys working on these right now?
Right in the middle of the process. I was actually up pretty late last night working on the initial iteration of our plan for next year. Yeah, I mean, I would say that the main component that we're trying to achieve is we're trying to simplify the plan that we have this year. When we started the process a year ago for 2023, initially I thought, oh, it's a fairly simple plan. Once we actually put the pen to paper and we drafted everything, and it ended up being fairly complex. And it was quite clear that, one, it takes a while for reps to understand it. Nothing new there, as we've heard in this discussion. And two, certain behaviors were not properly incentivized. So now we need to analyze, as I mentioned, what are the one or two key metrics that we need to achieve next year, and how do we make sure that everything in this plan is focused on optimizing those metrics. And I'm sure it's not going to be too groundbreaking, but like retention is a very key component for a lot of tech-focused businesses right now. So we're focused on growth and retention. Those are the key metrics that we're targeting.
Pablo, what are some compensation tools that would drive retention, for instance?
Using QuotaPath.
Perfect. No notes. Call it a day. Thanks, everyone.
No, I mean, it goes back to what Celine was talking about. The comp plan's the caboose, not the engine of the train, right? The engine's the strategy on a train. And your comp plan has to follow the strategy. And if you're doing it the other way around, you're not going to achieve your goals, right? So if GRR is important for Sergey and the team, and there's no GRR component in the comp plan, well, then don't be surprised when you're not hitting GRR, right? So you've got to make sure, if you've got issues, that the comp plan's incenting for what you want the strategy to be. So.
All right. We have just a few minutes left here, and we have two questions that I think we can quickly address with our last 2 minutes here. The first one, QuotaPath, our recommendation is 80% of your team is hitting quota, or I'm sorry, 80% of your team is achieving quota. Is that what you guys recommend as well? Where do you guys stand on that?
We work on 100% of the team over 80% and 80% over 100%. and I work towards personally 20% over 120%.
I totally followed that. Thank you. Sergey, how about you?
Yeah, generally the benchmark that I've always worked with is that across the board, most of the reps are hitting 70 to 80% of their quota, somewhere in that range. And I think it really depends on the team structure, where in the growth cycle the business is, how well developed is the go-to-market strategy, and maybe in some cases we'll target somewhere closer to that 70%, but generally it's in that fairly narrow range of 70 to 80%.
Pablo, your thoughts?
I'll disagree a little bit. I think from what I've seen in every role I've had, best-in-class companies have 65 to maximum 70% overachieving quota. Just because you have people ramping, you have people having a bad year, I don't think it's realistic to target higher number. I've never seen it, honestly. If you have a few reps, sure you can. But I actually see 65, 70% as being best in class above quota.
Great, thank you. Everyone, we are at time. That was a very fast hour. I'm going to drop in the chat to everyone our amazing panelists' LinkedIn profiles. If you would like to connect with them, they are there. If you haven't downloaded the report yet, please go ahead and do so. We will be sending the full recording as well as some key takeaways to everyone who has registered. So be prepared for that either later today or tomorrow. And once again, thank you all. Happy Comptober, happy comp planning. If you need any assistance or guidance with this comp plan design period or automating commissions, you know who to reach out to at QuotaPath. It is me, it is everyone here. And go ahead and follow QuotaPath on LinkedIn. I know the person who runs the social account would really appreciate it. And I know that because that person is me, so please go give QuotaPath a follow. Thank you again for all your questions. And thank you again to our esteemed panel. We appreciate you all for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.